Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Hey folks, welcome back. We are talking today about Gen Z and Millennial Divorce, rediscovering yourself after heartbreak with Lucy Price. Now, I know many of you are not in the Gen Z and Millennial area, but I'm thinking a lot of your kids are, and some of you are absolutely here. And so whether you're a millennial or part of Gen Z, breaking up in this phase of life brings unique challenges, from feeling the weight of being alone while your friends are still in relationship to grieving the future that you thought you'd have. And it can feel really overwhelming. And today's guest, Lucy Price, is a breakup and relationship coach who specializes in helping heal from heartbreak and move on to a life you love. And so you can read more about today's episode and Lucy in our show notes, but we're going to dive right in. Welcome, Lucy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And Lucy, I'd like to start with a fun fact about my guest. And so you and I were chatting about yours. Would you share with our audience your fun fact?
Absolutely. So one of my fun facts is I'm a very big coffee drinker, and this might not be necessarily the best for my health, but I easily go through 2 French presses of coffee a day. For me, it's just that I love the ritual of drinking coffee. I love the taste of coffee. It's a break in my day. So I'm a big coffee drinker.
I love that. And while I've never shared this with my audience, I French press, I ground my beans, I froth my cream, and so coffee is a very important ritual in my morning as well. So
Yeah.
we have that in common.
We do. It's a game changer to go from having like coffee with cold milk to warm milk. Like that, it just changes the game. So definitely resonate.
So as we dive in here, there is you and I work in the same field, and both work with people with heartbreak. And yet my audience tends to be in the mid 40s to the mid 60s. And so I would love to bring the conversation to what happens when you don't have that many years or decades under your belt and you face breakup or marry early and face divorce. And so let's start with, when you first meet someone, what are some of the unique challenges that your clients face?
So I think something that is a bit newer in society is the aspect of social media when it comes to breakups and divorces nowadays. When we look at the history of social media has only really been around 20 so years. And so it's one of those things that, of course, when you're going through a divorce or a large separation, a breakup with someone you've been with for a while, that might not necessarily be the most stressful thing. But I do think it's a unique stressor that more of my millennial or Gen Z clients are facing in a very different way than I think perhaps some of the previous generations have had to face. What happens when you have your engagement photos and your engagement get canceled? What happens when you're connected to so many people, or you're more of a public figure and then you announce your separation or your divorce and your breakup, and strangers who you don't know start weighing in and start taking sides? And I think that is one of the unique challenges that perhaps has been arising more recently, is just how do you navigate that aspect of social media and other people having opinions, or your ex being able to stay connected to you, or what do you share or not share? What happens when your ex is saying lies on the internet? And that is one of the biggest differences I see nowadays with my clients.
And what a great place to begin. I have 2 children in their
Mhm.
mid to late 20s, and their relationship with social media and mine are very, very different.
Yeah.
People think I'm on social media a lot, but the truth is my business is on a lot. I actually do very little. And not that there aren't people my age or my clients' age that don't engage more, but there is something about growing up with it, like
Yeah.
just participating in it from single digits on up, right? And therefore, it's such a bigger part of their world, right?
Yeah. And I think it feels bigger too because it's designed to feel that way. If you take a step back and you look at the tech industry, they're investing millions of dollars, billions of dollars into keeping you on social media and keeping you coming back and having those reward centers of the brains activated. So I think that in many ways, we can look at someone going through a separation or a hard time and social media being like an activation for them, being a really stressful thing for them, and think to ourselves, well, just turn it off, just put it down. Like, don't look at it, don't engage with it. But it isn't actually that simple. The people who are designing these apps are very clever and they're very good at making social media feel very important. And I
Well,
think
they're
it's,
yeah, they're
yeah,
creating addiction. The
yeah,
whole dopamine button, it's like you're getting an internal drug instead of an
yeah.
external drug. And I agree with you completely. And the other thing I'd love to just put on the table, I just thought about this. There was a point at which one of my kids was having an incredibly hard time and with a breakup, and yet sharing with me. And yet, if you looked at their social media,
Mhm.
you would never, everyone's like, oh my God, they're fine, they're great. And I'm thinking, what a bloody lie. It's like, that's not what's going on at all. And so not only is it addictive,
Yeah.
and that whole fear of missing out that comes with it and everything else. And it's like, I'm miserable and everybody else is so happy, but are they really?
Yeah, and it plays tricks on your mind because to build on that, one of the interesting things I think we see with social media nowadays is whether it's conscious or not, when you're going through a separation, you almost want to show that you're okay. And you spend so much time and intention proving that you're fine, proving that you don't care about your ex, but then you're not actually prioritizing your own well-being and processing the breakup and going through the grief of the breakup and allowing yourself to feel your feelings and come to terms with the relationship ending. I think that one of the interesting things that social media can do is yes, it can connect us to beautiful resources. A lot of my clients find me through social media, so it can do that. Absolutely. There is pros to this tool that is social media. But I also think that sometimes we can slip through and find ourselves spending more time trying to outwardly prove that we're okay or that we don't care or that we've moved on, while secretly we're really struggling with the separation, or we're looking at our ex's profile, we're secretly stalking their profile to see if they're okay, to see if they've moved on. And it can become this really hard cycle mentally and emotionally.
And it sounds almost like one more way to avoid the pain, really, right? So you could
Hmm.
drink, you can drug, you can binge Netflix, you can go clothes shopping, you can, or you can like just dive into social media, and all of these
Yeah.
things allow for avoiding and numbing. So how do you, let's pivot to the solution here. So when you find that you've got a young client
Mhm.
and they're engaging in a lot of social media, what's the impact on them, and how do you help them pivot? Because I'm sure we have a lot of people who are saying, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm doing that. So what is the impact for them, and how do they pivot?
So, the first thing I would say, if you're going to use social media, if that's going to be an outlet, whether you're looking for resources to support you with your separation, or it's just something you know you're engaging with, I think there's an opportunity to be very intentional with who you're following and why. I think this is something we also don't realize is social media is very much a tool. They want to keep you on the app. Okay, use that to your benefit. Do you like the people you're following? Are you inspired? Do you feel good? Is it actually helping you? Or do you go onto social media and follow these pages and you actually notice you're really upset or you're not feeling better about yourself? You're comparing yourself, you're beating yourself up. So, the first thing I would say is if you're going to use it intentionally, really craft your social media to be a place where you are inspired and uplifted. The second thing I would say here is if you're noticing that you are more falling into the trap of not feeling good, or you feel like you are avoiding your breakup, you're avoiding your divorce, you're not processing, as soon as you notice that, practice doing the hard thing of putting your phone down and dropping into your body and getting present with yourself. Because the more you reach for social media to be the tool with the distraction, the more that habit is going to form. And so you have to start breaking it. And it can be as simple as just putting your phone down, even if it's for 5 minutes. As soon as you're aware of, oh, I'm numbing or I'm not feeling good or this is causing me to have some anxiety, put the phone down, take a deep breath, and come back to your body and ask yourself, what am I thinking and feeling right now? And give yourself an opportunity to connect with yourself again.
And when one connects with their body and connects with the grief in their body, what do you find happens?
What I most notice is initially it's very uncomfortable. And I think that's because, in part, we're not taught, I find, often to connect with our bodies. And for a lot of people, they express to me the feeling of discomfort or confusion sometimes too, of like, I don't know what it means to connect with my body. And it makes sense. We are in a society that is so go, 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 that is so technology focused. So it makes sense that connecting with the body feels like there's a gap there between you knowing what it means and actually experiencing what it is. So I notice for a lot of people, when they do really start to tap into how they feel, it feels a little bit uncomfortable and it feels maybe a little bit like tension. But then what I notice after that, if you can allow yourself to be with what is, to just feel the sensations in your body. And when I say feeling the sensations in your body, I mean really trying not to attach even any thoughts necessarily to it, but okay, do I feel warmth in my skin? Do I feel a tightness in my chest? Do I feel butterflies in my stomach? What's the sensation? When you start to tap into that and really allow yourself to feel your feelings, you start to process them. And
Mm.
that means that you don't have to hold on to them. They don't get stored so much anymore. They can come to the surface. You can feel your way through them. And it's a lot easier to let difficult emotions go when they've had the opportunity to be felt.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing I think it does is, there's always the opportunity in the pain. And
Mhm.
if you haven't been a person who's very mindful or conscious, I wasn't when I entered my divorce, just the sitting in the discomfort and beginning to notice what what are my tells? My neck always gets tight, or wow, I really feel it on my chest, or I get that knot in my stomach. It's different for all of us. And so, even just taking the time to feel your body and then be like, oh, is it always in my stomach? Is it always not in my stomach? And that does two things from my perspective is one, it gets your mind off of what you're ruminating on. So your
Yeah.
stress comes down, but you're also really connecting with who am I and how am I wired? And what can I learn through this painful time about myself that could help me going forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that, oh, is my neck always this tense? One of the things I realized for myself when I was starting to connect with my body and myself through my separation is when I was stressed, my hip would hurt. I would notice my hip hurting before I would even consciously think to myself, oh, I'm stressed, oh, I'm anxious, oh, I'm upset. And that's the really cool thing about connecting with your body is your body can speak to you in a different way when you do.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll notice an ache in your body before you consciously know what that ache is about. And that's a powerful piece of knowledge to have for yourself, I think.
Yeah. And not to transgress, but it actually, so often people will have a physical pain or illness, and it's the body telling them that they're uber stressed on one level or another. So it's like, what's wrong with my hip? But it may not be a
Mhm.
physical issue. It may be an emotional
Emotional.
issue that's just sitting in your hip, which if I had heard that 15 years ago, I'd be like, what? But it's so true. Like the body holds the score, and that's
Mhm.
somatic communication. And I'm in my early 60s. This was not something that was on anyone's radar, my parents' radar. It wasn't something that we learned. And so, as we learn more about the body, to be able to use it in our healing
Mhm.
is beautiful.
Yeah, and to speak on that a little bit too, or to expand rather, I think that's the interesting thing about emotions too. Like I look back at generations before us, and processing emotions is really something that's quite new today. I think back to my parents, my grandparents' generation, even my great grandparents, I knew them as well. And it was very much, I'm English, so it was very much tough upper lip. It was very much, we don't feel our feelings, we don't express our feelings.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting because I think that the other thing I notice with Gen Zs and millennials is there is a little bit more willingness to express feelings and talk about feelings privately, not necessarily publicly, like on social media or in that way. But I do think that there is a little bit more natural willingness to speak about emotions or to open up in that way. And I think that is in part because the dialogue around mental health and emotions has begun to shift in the
absolutely.
last like 20, 30 years, which is a benefit to all of us.
And as you say that, I believe that men and older men are at such a disadvantage being
Mhm.
raised with only sissies cry and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and shut that shit down. You can't talk to the boys about that, only about football or golf or whatever. And my experience with my children's male friends is that it seems like there's much more openness, much more willingness and comfort to talk about feelings and to have that healthier way of processing.
Yeah. And I think that's something I notice with my clients as well. I would say a third of my clients tend to be men. So I work with both men and women, most women, but a third are men. And something that I notice to be the hard thing about separations in their cases is they feel they've really lost the person that they open up to emotionally. And their partner tends to be the person that they open up about their emotions. And now, after the separation, it's harder for them to know necessarily who to talk to or who to confide in because there is still a lot of stigma around emotions and being a man. And I think there's a lot more work to be done around that. I think that there is progress being made, but I do think that is one of the things I have to agree of being a disadvantage is still being a man and expressing emotions is still stigmatized, unfortunately. And I hope we continue to progress out of that because people are people, humans are humans, everybody has emotions, but it is an unfortunate thing today.
Yeah. So let's pivot here. One of the things I would love to hear is when somebody finds themselves in breakup or divorce, and especially in your 20s and 30s, where so many people are entering in long term
Mhm.
relationships, or they've just gotten married, or they're starting to have babies. What how does that impact your clients of a similar age when they're looking around and seeing that? What's the story that they create? What's the pain that comes with that? Your kids may not be the only ones taking tests this year. SoberLink is the number one alcohol monitoring device on the market for parents who need to prove their sobriety. Here's how it works. Your co parent will test at scheduled times each day. Built in facial recognition confirms their identity. Tamper sensors flag any attempts to cheat. And results get sent instantly to your phone. So you know your kids are with a sober parent, whether it's during school nights or weekends away. Set your family up for success this school year. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device. Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Divorce feels like an overwhelming perfect storm as you navigate pain, fear, and confusion while struggling with unfamiliar legal procedures and the pressure to make complex decisions that will impact the rest of your life. Our free Rapid Relief Call provides the clarity and confidence you're yearning for. Visit rapidreliefcall.com for support and guidance today.
So I would say one of the biggest things I notice is feeling the loss of friendships and community. And that comes from a couple of places. I would say the first place is having a lot of crossover in relationships between them and their partner. And so mutual friends or mutual communities. And I think that can be a standard thing for
Across,
anyone.
absolutely.
Yeah, going
Absolutely.
across the board.
Because you
But
lose
then
some. You just
you
lose some.
do. Unfortunately, and it's something that comes along with separation and divorce. Unfortunately, you can't just separate from your partner. There are other relationships that do get lost along the way. And I think that's just a hard truth of separations, whether or not it's your choice or not. I think that's just different relationships. Different people have opinions on whose side to take, quote unquote, or who they believe or not. Like it sometimes not all your friends come with you. And it's a hard thing to grieve. I think it's a thing you have to grieve alongside of grieving the end of your romantic relationship. But I do think that's a standard thing across the board. I would say the other piece that comes along is I think there was recently an article about this on the New York Times, but people avoiding you because they feel like divorces or breakups catch. And that if you're going through a separation, that's going to like quote unquote catch on to other people or other relationships. That's something that I have noticed become a fear for my clients who come to me is I'm afraid that I'm going to start losing friendships or relationships because I'm going through a separation and one of my closest friends' boyfriend doesn't want her hanging out with me
Oh
because
my
I'm going through a
God, like all of a
separation.
sudden you have a scarlet
Yeah.
letter on you. I've
Yeah.
never heard that before. That's
Yeah. And it's interesting. Before doing this work, I never thought about it before, if I'm being honest. I never thought to myself that would be a thing. But it's interesting because in this last year, especially, I've had that come up a few times of this fear of losing friends because okay, I'm going through a divorce and it's quote unquote going to catch on to other people. And I don't know where that's popped up from, if I'm being completely transparent, but it's something that I've noticed enter the room in my conversations with people recently. So I would be curious even within myself to do more, I don't know if it's research or ask more questions around it, but it is one of the things that has popped up a lot more within my clients in this past year.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. We're going to stop for a short break. And after, we're going to come back and talk about the challenge of one's biological clock
Yeah.
and while all of this is happening. So stay tuned. So now that we're back, let's talk about that being late 20s, early 30s, feeling like, oh my God, we're breaking up or we're divorcing. And this is my prime time to be starting a family. Can you talk about the pressure that you see that put on your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say most of my clients, when they come to me, are in their 30s or early 40s. I would say that's the primary ages of my clients. And that is one of the top things that comes up in my conversations with the women I work with is the fear of, I'm not going to find anybody. I'm not going to be able to have kids. I'm not going to be able to have a family. And I think what that ends up leading people to do is put a lot of pressure on themselves to get out and start dating, to meet the one. Or in some cases, it is what caused people to stay in the relationship longer than maybe they actually wanted to or was healthy for them because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to have the kids, the life, the family if they weren't with that particular partner. So it's a very common fear that comes up with my clients.
And then when you're that young and you do start a family and then you're divorcing that young, I would love to talk a little bit about the financial and career ramifications that you see in your clients. I have so many clients who like they'll say, I chose to stay until the
Mhm.
kids went in college, until they were in high school, like so that it was less bumpy. But when you're that young and you've got young children, that's a real unique difficulty that you face.
Yeah. And I think that what I'm seeing with my clients who don't have shared kids or anything like that, is the financial aspect is actually coming from, we talk about the housing market, we talk about inflation. It's actually because it's hard for them to pay rent alone. And so some of the interesting things that I've talked to my clients around is that struggle of, I don't know financially how I'm going to live alone, or I have to find a roommate. And that's in part because some of my clients living in New York, for example, rent
Crazy,
is
crazy.
crazy,
And it's
crazy
not just New
high.
York, coast to coast,
Yeah,
every freaking city across the country. It's
yeah.
just off the charts.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I do with my clients is I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a financial expert, but we do talk a little bit about, okay, how can we plan for this? You're going through this separation. What are some options? Let's get some options on the board. Let's explore what that could look like. Does this look like moving in with a roommate, saving? Does this look like you're going to be living with your partner for another 6 months, your ex for another 6 months, because that's how long your lease is? Like, how can we make that amicable? How can we go through those challenges? So the financial piece, a lot of that comes up more so
From a
between
housing.
living, yeah, from a housing perspective, as opposed to
The
splitting
kids.
custody or young children or anything like that.
Yeah, I want to touch on that before we go back to the kids. So glad you brought that up. So I interviewed this woman. I will introduce you to her offline. I'm not remembering her name. Her website is Co-Abode, and it's free, and it's like a dating site where women go on and they fill out this little profile, and then they see if there are other single women or single moms in the area, and they can carpool together. They can choose to see if they're really well aligned and find housing together. It's absolutely brilliant. You should
Oh,
have her
wow.
on your site.
Yes,
We
please.
have that link in the show notes so that if you, the listener, missed that episode and you're interested, I want you to get it, because I think that regardless of your age, housing costs are off the
Hmm.
rails.
Hmm.
And one of the things this woman talks about is how much money is saved, especially when two single moms come together. And it's like, you watch the kids, I'm going to the yoga class, or you're just sharing household duties plus the rent so that there's more time, there's more money. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think it might be beautiful for your audience of people.
Karen, I love that. I did not even know that existed. So I'm very excited to have that. I would love to connect with her. And what a beautiful resource, because one of the top things that keeps women, especially in abusive relationships, is the financial aspect
Yes.
too. That is one of the top things. And so I think having that resource out there of being able to connect and share financial load between you and another woman who is going through something, another single mom who's going through
Yep.
something. What an incredible resource. And I like props to the person who created that, because that is seriously a very cool resource. And I'm excited to look into it more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting back to my initial question about starting a family, do you have many in that situation? Because that's also such a long lifetime of co parenting. When my children were 4 and 6 when I told them. So, I spent a lot of time co
Mhm.
parenting with my ex. But the younger the children, it's a long journey. What is your
It is.
experience with that?
Yeah, so I've had a few clients who have been co-parenting with their ex or who have kids with their ex, and each situation is uniquely different, of course, different custody agreements, different relationships with the past ex. So it all looks a little bit different depending on the case, but that is something that I've seen within my clients. And it's a different thing because part of my work with my clients is helping people move on from their exes and to process and to grieve that relationship. It's different to process a relationship with an ex where you never have to see them again. You never
Yes.
have to talk to them again versus an ex who you do have to see because you have a custody agreement with them and you share kids with them. They are the mother or father of your children. So it is a very different dynamic to move on from an ex, depending on whether you have to see them again inherently, but also whether you're raising children with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's pivot as we head toward wrapping up. I would love to hear a couple of tips on like your key tips on beginning to heal
Mhm.
in these situations so that we can leave our listeners with something very tangible. And then I know you have a free gift to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is going back to feeling your feelings. I won't harp on the point because I know we already talked about it, but give yourself permission to process your feelings without getting attached to a story around it. So, for example, allow yourself to just feel the anger in your body instead of having the story be attached of I'm angry because my ex is an ass. I'm angry. I don't know if we can say that,
Yes, you
but
can.
okay. Like I'm angry because my ex left me and I'm never going to find anyone. And that means I'm not good enough. Don't attach a story to your emotions. Just allow yourself to be present with your emotions and process your emotions. So that'd be the layer one. Then the layer two I would look at is what is the story you're telling yourself? What is your brain going back to consistently? Is your brain believing you're never going to find anybody or that your chance of having kids is over or you just lost the love of your life? Really get underneath the stories you're telling yourself and start engaging with those thoughts and shifting those thoughts to be more supportive for you. And that's not going to happen overnight. When we get to the free gift, in that free gift, there's tools to help with this, to help with thought shifts. So you can dive into those as well. But start practicing shifting the story you're telling yourself because when you shift your mindset, you shift your actions, you shift how you feel, and you shift how you show up, which then shifts the results you're going to get in your life and in your moving on process. So feel, shift your mindset around it. And then,
And I'm just going to add where
yeah.
your mind goes, your emotions flow. And
Hmm.
so it's just so valuable to poke around at those stories. Like, how true
Yeah.
is that? What else could be?
Yeah.
Just to give some space to other possibility. I love those two. And then you have a third.
Yeah. Yeah, really questioning those thoughts, like you said, getting curious around them, challenging them, looking for other perspectives that could be true. Our brains get really fixated on what we believe. And part of that is our brains don't like change. Our brains want to protect us and don't want us to change. And thinking differently means change, which feels scary to the brain and to the body. So definitely challenge those thoughts. And then the last piece I was going to put in there is practice taking action before you necessarily feel ready. Don't go stretch yourself overboard. But I think that sometimes people resist taking steps forward for themselves because they're waiting for themselves to feel differently, when really taking the action is what would help them to feel differently and to start thinking differently.
I
Yeah.
love that one. I had subletted my home for a month, and when I came home, the only thing that was left from my subletter was a note on my whiteboard.
Mm,
And she was a 30 something, very physically active woman. And it said, motivation does not precede action, it follows it.
mm,
And I just
mhm.
sat there reading it. And that's exactly what you were saying. It's if you want to be motivated to change at a certain point, I feel like you've worked with your coach, you know something in your head, you know it in your heart, and now you're just toe to toe with your comfort zone. And there's nothing left to do but to step through that discomfort
Uh-huh.
and trust that life is better on the other side of it.
And there's so much that is learned from the experience of action. And when you take action, like I think unfortunately we fall into these traps as people sometimes of intaking information and thinking we're taking action, but really we're just intaking information or we're waiting to get ready. It's like we're getting ready to get ready to take the action. And then we don't actually take the action, which would give us far more practical information about ourselves, about our lives, about where we want to go, than thinking about it would. Because thinking is all theory, action gives you something tangible for you to look at. And I think it's unfortunately just this thing that we resist again because change and coming toe to toe with your comfort zone is really scary for our brains. And when you do that, your life will change. When you take more action, your life will change, in my opinion, for the better because you have something practical you can work off of.
So let's just put a call to action out there right now.
Yeah.
For I want to encourage you to after listening to this episode to decide one thing where and you felt and you're just standing there maybe waiting or wanting to do a little more research. What is one action step that you can take to step through your comfort zone today or this week. And I think that would be a huge gift. If you're a regular JBD podcast listener, then you know we're always encouraging in this direction. So go ahead and step out of your comfort zone, do something, and feel free to email us at info@journeybeyonddivorce.com as well to share what happened. I love that. I love those three tips. And then let's wrap this up with the free gift that actually helps people move forward in these three areas. Go ahead and tell us about that.
Absolutely. So I have a workshop for anyone who listens to this podcast called You Are the Prize. And You Are the Prize is a self-love workshop. And when we go onto the internet or social media, or even just in conversation, we all talk about the importance of self-love. But I realized that self-love is a really hard thing to pin down. And so in this workshop, I've broken it down into practical things you can do to shift your mindset, to make changes, to love yourself, and to show up for yourself. Because when you invest in your own self-love and developing your relationship with yourself, you show up differently to your life. And again, you get different results from that place. So in this workshop, we're going to break down some of the mindset around self-love, practical things that you can do to shift your mindset around self-love, as well as how to form that different relationship with yourself. So You Are the Prizes, the workshop, and I can't wait for anyone who listens to this to go ahead and dive in.
And the link is in the show notes. And I just want to pivot off of that. I had a client who once shared an email with me. And when I read the email, I was just so taken back by the amount of self-condemnation. And we were on a Zoom call and I shared that with her and she's reading it and she goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it. And so we went line by line, and it's amazing how awareness can happen in a moment. And she was so blown away just reading it with me with a new set of eyes and seeing. And the takeaway was self-love, right? Like, look at all of these places where you're just beating the shit out of yourself. And so for our listener, it can be hidden. And especially if it's been, I know for me, I was so mean to myself for so long and you don't even know it. You get so used to your own self-condemnation. And so if this is you, if this resonates, or if it's just like, I don't know if that's, check this workshop out, because the gift of self-love it's the lotus flower. It blooms and it keeps on blooming and it keeps on giving. And it's a beautiful gift. Thank you so much for offering it to our guests.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Awareness is so powerful, like you said. And the more awareness you develop around how you think and how you feel about yourself, it will absolutely transform your life, because when you grow in awareness, you grow in your ability to change. And I think that is so powerful. So I love how you also mentioned that, because sometimes we can get so used to our mindset and how we talk about ourselves. It's like the hum of a refrigerator. After a while, you don't even notice it. And you have to rebuild that awareness in order to do anything about it. So I also love that you mentioned that then.
Beautiful. And how can our listeners find you? You have a podcast.
I do have a podcast, and we're going to have to get you on very soon. So my podcast is Breakups and Breakthroughs. So you can listen to the episodes there. You can also find me on my website at www.shiftyourstory.net. And then you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at lucy.m.price.
And if you are facing a gray divorce and your children are in their 20s and 30s and they're struggling with breakup, please share this episode so that they can find Lucy and work with her as well. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll be back again real soon with another episode. You have your best day. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.